In this video, we're going to be talking about first how to set up for the row test and then how to optimize your form while you're performing the row. So first things first, making sure everything's set up on the row. From a structure standpoint, making sure you have your screen pulled forward. Most organizations will go ahead and set your dial at 5. Depending on the organization, they might have you go through a process to calculate drag factor. But it's very, very common for organizations and associations to just push this dial over the 5. So that's going to be very common. Usually from a training side, I have people train at various intensities or various levels here. Might have you at 5s, 8s, and 10s, depending on how the programming goes. But for the most part, if you're looking at testing, it's very, very common to have it at 5. So we have our row set up. I want to make sure I have enough space back here. Just so as I'm going back, I'm not bumping into anything as I'm performing the row test. So we're pretty much set up here. So now I'm going to go ahead and get on the rower. Where a lot of people mess up initially before they even begin the row test is setting their foot positioning, right? Getting locked in. Many times when you're working for, let's say you're testing for an organization, you can't get locked in, be halfway through your test, and then have to readjust, change your foot positioning. Like, your time is still going. So it's the best bang for your buck is making sure you take as much time as you need to, as well as how much time you're allowed, to really set your foot positioning. Now I'll go ahead and adjust my foot positioning here, making sure I match on both sides. As you change the height or where your foot is going to be positioned here, you want to make sure this strap, as you tighten up, should be overlapping the widest part of your foot, right? So as you're pressing off, your foot's not slipping through. You're making sure you get a lot of surface area there to really lock you in. So having it set to the widest part of your foot. So you'll make sure you do both sides. Don't just put your feet in there. Make sure you pull the strap to really lock your feet in. Again, most of the time when you start the test, depending on what organization you work with or testing for, once you're locked in and you start your time, you can't readjust. So take a moment, be like, okay, am I set to where I need to be? Is this good? Do I feel comfortable? Many times the organization will allow you to do a couple of warm-up repetitions to kind of get you prepped for the test. There's no promises that all organizations will allow you to do that or have some kind of routine for you to do prior. But for the most part, usually you're able to kind of fiddle through, go through a couple of motions just to make sure you're set. So I have my feet locked into place. I'm pretty much ready to go from a structure standpoint. Next, I won't worry about fiddling with the screen for now. Usually a test admin will fiddle with that. Maybe in other videos we'll talk about how to go through inputting different things to get tests started or to start workouts and things like that. That may all be dependent on the model or the rower that you use, but that can be covered in other avenues. But we're set for this row test, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and grab the handle. I'm going to go through and talk through the 3 main steps or the 3 main cues that I give for performing the row test, right? Especially if you've never done a row before and you want to start practicing, maybe you're prepping for a testing session, you need to make sure you have these 3 cues down and think of it as a sequence, right? So before I get set, I want to make sure my shoulders are back. You're going to be using your legs a ton. You're going to be using your back a ton. You're going to be pulling and using your arm a ton. And there's plenty of warm-ups. We'll go through in other videos, different warm-up segments. But those are the 3 main things: legs, hips, and back, or pull or row, right? So I want to slowly walk through this. So as the cord is here, I usually see a lot of people will bring their body all the way forward. That's not necessarily necessary. Usually when I see people go all the way over here, they start burning out or fatiguing their upper back and their lower back because they're exposing themselves a ton. So I like to get a lot of mobility in the legs, a lot of mobility in the hips to allow me to really sink all the way forward. So as I drive, I'm able to push through my legs, extend my hips, and then row. And it should be a 3-part sequence. Think legs, hips, row. Reset, legs, hips, row. And it should be this process. It's very, very common where I see people do this. And notice the distance here to here, how far this bar travels versus pressing and pulling all the way through, right? Fully extending, legs, hips, pull. And you can pause for a second as you're practicing legs, hips, pull. And just pressing through. Legs, hips, pull. And working your way. There's plenty of warm-ups and different things you can do to really dial in those mechanics. But at the end of the day, those 3 cues as you're pushing through: legs, extend with your hips, and pull. Pretty much right below that chest line, maybe right above the belly button there. Press through the legs, extend, pull as you're going through the row test. Again, it's very common for me to see people just use their legs and just kind of be here. You're not going to go as far. You're not extending through. Also, as people come forward, if you don't have the mobility in your hips, you're not able to really sync with your legs. You're kind of here and you compensate. Versus as I work my way back, I have the mobility in my hips. Now I'm able to really get in a good position, press, extend, pull. Now let's talk preparation. Let's talk about before you get on the rower. Now, whether you've rowed before or not, you still need to go through some set of dynamic stretching. You need to prep your body physically to be able to jump on a rower and perform. You shouldn't go, walk on or sit onto a rower just super cold and just expect optimal performance. You should go through some sort of dynamic stretching routine, as well as if you've never rowed before, integrating some sort of warm-up, or let's say you've rowed before, but maybe you're not as savvy, you need to work on some of your cueing, then this is a pretty good warm-up that you could use, or a variation of this warm-up you could use. That I typically have individuals, before we conduct testing, I'll have them do a variation of this just to get their musculature ready to begin the test. So I'm going to go ahead and get myself situated on the rower. Right? Normally when I have someone sit down on the rower, I'll make sure they're set, make sure they can grab the handle, and we're ready to go. The first step to this process, right, is kind of pushing off just a little bit with your legs. And now that's it. This is as far as I'm going to go with my legs, and everything is going to be upper body, right? So I'm going to be set. I'm not going to push off. I'm not going to get closer with my legs. My knees should stay where they're at, as bent as they are. And I'm here, and I think of a big pull. All upper body. Pull. Pull. I don't want it slow, like, okay, this is the row, a pull, right? I want it explosive. I want a big pull right here. Big pull, pause. Relax, big pull, pause. I want you to get used to ripping that cord with your upper body. Next segment is using your legs. So I want you to come closer, press with your legs. Closer, press with your legs, right? You can do 5 to 10 repetitions, 10 to 15, but I want you to get your legs prepared to really push off as you're performing the row. But everything is going to be primarily focused on the lower body. Now we're integrating those together, right? So I come closer. Now I'll go legs, hips, arms, pause. Then you could do a negative. I'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Press off, pull. Pause, pause, pause. Slowly work my way forward. Press off, pull. Slowly work my way back. Press off, pull. Slowly work my way back. And you can do a couple of repetitions of those. Really ingraining, emphasizing, hey, lower body, upper body, now through that sequence, right? And just get used to using that musculature. Just get used to the mechanics of the task. So an easy way to integrate kind of isolated tasks and then putting it all together for your warm-up. Now let's talk about some modifications, right? We talked about just your basic mechanics as you're performing the row. Think about legs, hinging, and then pulling. So we think of legs, hips, and then pull as we're going through. Now we can talk about some slight modifications of our mechanics. This personally works for me when I'm doing more of your 500-meter row, maybe when I'm doing 250-meter rowing, more of that power and dynamic type of tasks. I like to modify a little bit. Now, this isn't a, hey, you should do this recommendation. This is just a find what works for you on how you're leveraging your weight, how you're leveraging your mechanics as you're going through to be as explosive as you can. Now, mobility is going to be a factor, but then your baseline strength and power is going to be a huge factor in how you perform these tests. So for me, I know that once I sink at the bottom, I'm very powerful if I dip my hips underneath and I think of a jump, right? If I do a vertical jump, I'm not leaning too far forward as I'm doing a vertical jump. I'm really trying to sink my hips underneath and drive up as I'm going through. So just a difference, right? Let's say a very standard form is I'm here and I go legs, hips, extend, right? Let's say I'll do a couple. Legs, hips, extend. Legs, hips, extend. Legs, hips, extend. I will modify it to where I dip my hips underneath and I lean back enough to really, really push off with my quads and be as explosive. Like I'm trying to do a vertical jump backwards to be as explosive. Now, again, this is a modification you don't have to do, but it just personally allows me to be a little bit more explosive. So let's say traditional form, right? As I'm here, legs hinge, pull, legs hinge, pull. If I dip underneath, I'm able to be a little bit more explosive on the pull as I dip my hips underneath as I'm performing the task. So all in all, find what works for you. Really need hip mobility, really need ankle mobility to sink in. How you push off is going to be personal to your structure and your preference, but you have to find what works for you. And the only way to find what works for you is by getting on a rower and practicing. Here we're going to be talking about energy systems as they associate to row testing. It's very common to work with people that come in and depending on, hey, we're going to do a 500-meter row or we're going to do a 2K row or a 5K row. Most of the time I have individuals say, well, I've used a rower before, that shouldn't be too hard, or I've done a 2K before, and so the 500 meters shouldn't be that bad, and vice versa. So I row and might do 250, 400 meters, 500 meters. 2K, you're just kind of extending that out. It's not too bad. But there's a huge difference between these tests, right? And we look at it from a fatigue factor, both from a musculature sense, as well as an energy system sense, right? How are we fueling the body to perform these tasks? How did we train our body to be able to perform these tasks and to optimally, right? How do we successfully complete a 500-meter row, a 2,000-meter row, or if you're more of that longer duration, you might see a 5K row, but it's very common with many entities and organizations that we work with. It's very common to see a 500-meter row and a 2K row. Now, even just these two alone, highly different. Now, you still have the same mechanics from a rowing perspective. 500-meter row is going to have maybe a slight difference in the biomechanics or how you're posturing as you're doing your row, just because you want to be as explosive, as powerful as possible. And then as you go to the 2K row, even though you do want some power behind it, you are doing repetition after repetition for probably a period of 7 minutes to 9 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, depending on what you need to pass for the organization that you're needing to get into or sustain. But there's a huge difference between these two tests. Just because they are both rowing doesn't mean they're the exact same thing. For the 500-meter row, we're looking at more fast switch. We're looking at anaerobic. We're thinking of, explosive, powerful, trying to get as many meters as fast as possible, looking at a duration about 1.5 to 2 minutes, right? This is that fight or flight, 1.5 to 2 minutes. 2K row is more of your 7 to 8 minutes. Yes, you want a pretty good pace, but you want to be able to sustain that work for 6, 7, 8 minutes, 10 minutes. So highly different alone in the time frame and how much work you're going to have to do within that period of time. So you're going to need to train in that adaptation mark. Don't assume because you train for the 2K row, don't assume because you do more of that lower intensity, long duration or long distance on the row that you're going to be good at the 500 meter, and vice versa. Just because you're good at the 500 meter row doesn't mean you're good at 2K. Just because you're good at 2K doesn't mean you're good at 500 meter row. An example of this, we think about it with repetitions, right? You have individuals, you probably associate a little bit more with this in this nature where, you know, an individual might be able to lift 500 pounds. Let's just say that, right? Super strong. Maybe they do 300 pounds for 10 reps, but then they do very light 100 pounds and they can only do, you know, let's say they did that for 5 to 10 reps and then they do 100 pounds for 20 reps. Right? You might have another individual where they can only do 200 pounds for 5 to 10 reps, but then on the 100 pounds, they can do 40, 50, 60 repetitions with that weight. They are more trained and more conditioned for that lighter weight and higher repetitions. And we usually see this in the gym setting with, you know, higher reps and lower load, or higher load and lower reps. We see that very common, or we associate that easier, but we need to associate the exact same things over here with the 500 meter and the 2K row. All right, with 500 meters, this isn't your first 10 seconds matter. With a 2K row, because it takes about 7, 8, 9 minutes, your first 10 seconds, I'm not going to say they don't matter. You want to get in a good mentality, you want to get into good pacing, but those first 10 seconds are not going to make or break you, honestly. With the 500 meter row, that first 10 to 15 seconds truly matters. If you mess up in the very beginning, it's going to take a lot to kind of come back from that, right? So you have to be explosive and powerful out the gate. Now, for both tests, you should be giving all or nothing, right? If it's an entrance test, if it's for incumbents, and you're needing to sustain a certain standard just throughout your years of service, trying to stay, you know, your time stay below a certain time, then, then yes, be mindful of these things, but you have to know exactly what you're training for. 500 meter row, very explosive, very dynamic. You should get off of that rower. Now for both, you should get off of that rower breathing hard. You should, it is like you got done, you just finished wrestling someone for 2 minutes, gave all you got, and you're standing up and you can barely walk and you're trying to gather yourself, right? You should be giving max effort no matter which test. But that 500 meter row, because it's so powerful, so explosive, you may or may not be a lot more fatigued in a different manner because of this test versus a 2K row. But pretty much to summarize the difference between the two, energy system wise, thinking this first one, it's more explosive, more dynamic, big, powerful pulls, versus the 2K row. You want to find a pace, you want to find a cadence. Yes, you're going max effort, but there's more of a rhythm to a 2K row. 500, all or nothing, max effort, trying to get it done as fast as possible.